mitigate for that kind of sudden growth? Is that the intention in future years, that you prevent it happening because you're reading the weather situation, the climate better?
Through the chair, in the long term, I guess you'd want to have some sort of system and robustness in what you're working with. So yes, you would have to think about increasing the dose. That would be my pragmatic thoughts. At this stage, we're operating at our maximum limit. So any changes to that would require a variation to those resource consents to get an increase in the dose. But yeah, very much so. You'd like to have a more of a flexibility in how you operated it.
Thank you. Sorry, another question subsequent to your answer in terms of operating at your dosing limit. So in terms of the resource consent process, what are the concerns in terms of negative environmental impacts? What's the barrier to increasing that dose?
Through the chair, I would generally expect there's a concern that it could produce toxic diatoms, which then could be harmful. So we're having to monitor that and make sure that it's managed well. So the concern is that the effects that would have in the outside environment. So we'd have to go through a process of proving that we're monitoring it and we're managing it, and it's
released out of the modeller's pond. Sorry, I didn't quite understand the answer.
So during events, rainfall events and things, water comes in, and then the water will leave as well.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
So it's not a closed system. It does interact with the environment. So you would need to do further assessment of effects to show that you can increase that dosage.
Maybe I can add an explanation to Councillor Fulton's query.
Through the chair, Councillor Walker.
I have the greatest respect for David Light. David's in a really difficult position because he's come into this project at a very late stage. So it's difficult there. But really, the decision to make the amount of dosing that we decided that we would apply for was based on what we knew at that time, which was early in this year. The pond had been cleaned out in December to meet the commitment that Mr. Laverdis made to the modellers for their convention. So it was cleaned out, and we had, at the time, not unrealistic expectations that we would be able to get a resource consent so we could get on with the trial within a couple of months. As it's been mentioned, it took an awful lot longer than that. When the application was made, it was made on the basis that what we knew at the time. As soon as we started the trial, we learned that we have all these nutrients coming up through the bottom of the pond, warm water. If you walk across it, it's very noticeable, and if you're wearing conventional waders. And so we had that, and then for the first time we were able to assess the nutrient quality of the stormwater. That immediately threw all the calculations out. We were lulled into a false sense of security because the first 2 months of the trial, it worked extremely well. But it was also in the colder winter temperatures, so there wasn't going to be a lot of growth anyway. And what confused us was that there appeared to be some growth that we could see if we looked really closely. And then we now realise it was the nutrients coming from the stormwater and the underground water. So it made sense to us that if we could, in the event of a major storm event, react quickly and not so much double dose, but based on our experience, dose it a little bit more than the consent conditions. If that gave us that ability, that would be fine. But the issue is that the consent cost $30,000 to get in the first place. We were told that we had run out of the money allocated for the trial. And to change from that amount to that amount was another $30,000. So you have to be sure as to where that figure was arrived at. So that's part of the issue that we're facing right at the moment. So the other thing that disturbs me is that when I became Chair of Works and Infrastructure, I took it upon myself to make sure that certain projects had the right name. And while it's always been known as the Modeller's Pond, it is in fact an essential part of the city or the Tuhunanui Stormwater Network. So its correct term is the Tuhunanui Stormwater Detention Pond. And the purpose of it is that when there is a storm event and all the stormwater from the roads and roofs and all the rest of it, it goes and accumulates to the lowest part of that area, which is Centennial Park, where there is a huge underground tank. And from there, the stormwater is pumped into the settling tank, which happens to be the pond. So I know there's been a lot of discussion in the past when we've been looking at other alternatives that we discussed before we came up, or before we became aware of a biological solution to a biological problem. But essentially, those that promoted the idea and said, return it to estuary, it can't ever happen. When you clean the pond out, what's left at that end, can we return, John, to the photo showing the two pipes that come out there? The two pipes that discharge from, there they are there, just back one. Those two pipes that discharge, there they are there. They are this diameter each. They're huge, and the massive pumps at Centennial Park. And so they discharge at an extremely high rate into there. And all the rubbish and effluent that's in the stormwater system settles in the pond, and that's the purpose of it. If there is no pond, the back beach area will be black within, depending on the weather and at the time of the year for algae to grow, it will be a mess in the back beach. And you only need to see this even in the Maitai. If you look at the Maitai when it's raining after it being a long period of dry weather, the discharge that goes into the Maitai is not a pretty sight either. So that's the purpose of it. It is the Tuhunanui Stormwater Detention Pond. When it's cleaned up and tidied up, it makes quite a good modeller's pond. But there will always be a need for some sort of detention pond there.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. I'm just going to come back to get some officer advice around Councillor Fulton's question around the resource consent, if that's all right, David. And I was actually going to go to Ms. Barton, if that's all right, because I think I was listening to that question, the answer, and in my head I'm wondering whether, and I understand the resource consent condition that you're limited to what you can put in, so if you want to put more in, you're going to have to get a variation to the resource consent. What I'm trying to work out does a doubling mean a doubling of effects, or is it essentially, would it be considered de minimis given the dilution factor, or is it we don't know?
So through you, Madam Mayor, I just remind Council that the consent that was applied for and that has been granted is for a period of 18 months as a trial, so that the effects of the activity can be monitored during that trial process, so that any long-term application for beyond 18 months is fully informed by that monitoring information, because at this point in time we don't know all of those longer term effects. So the monitoring will help inform any future application that comes in for longer term dosing.
It didn't answer it.
So, but could I just ask, so in granting the consent, in order to be able to, given this is a regional matter, in granting the consent, there must have been an assessment of effects that considered it to be satisfactory for the grant.
So through you, Madam Mayor, yes, on the dosage amounts that were proposed and for the fact that it was a shorter term trial period.
So is there considered to be some risk factor with a higher dosage?
So through you, Madam Mayor, at this point, yes, because we don't understand the fully longer term effects, which is what the monitoring is intended to do, and that's part of the conditions of the consent.
All right, so I'm going to ask one more question, because I'm not sure it's probably getting into you, but therefore, how was the current dose safe? If the answer is we're trialling it and we'll find out later, so how did it even get off
So through you, Madam Mayor, I don't know the details. All I do know that it was based on the dilution effects and the shorter, the volume of what was actually being put in, which was a small amount.
Okay, all right, we'll move on. Councillor Laurie.
Thanks. A few questions for me, if it's okay. And I genuinely don't mean any disrespect by this, and I totally actually take my hat off to you guys for your commitment and the way you've endured over this issue for many years. But I've been on council since 2013, and I don't remember ever seeing a report which had a recommendation that had sort of nestled in amongst the recommendations a note from the staff saying they don't support it. It's very strange, and it makes it very hard for me to want to support the recommendations. My question is, how are we supposed to take it seriously?
I don't know if that's a... Yes, I think you do, I'm somewhat nervous saying this, you discharge your duty as a governor and assess the information in front of you and you make a decision. That's what you do.
So my
Councillor Laurie, I have to say this, and I don't think Pat was here at the time. I did receive a report at one point with officer advice that supported fish going in there because they were going to solve the problem. And backing the officer advice, I had a very embarrassing scenario.
We never got the fish and chips either.
could have had. I mean, I don't.
She never got the fish and chips.
My question is like we never. This is, you know, I've never seen a recommendation like this with a message from the staff saying we don't support it. But this is the recommendation.
So
I'm very confused.
The staff advice is we're more conservative, I think, more risk averse.
So we have a report, with respect, we have a report from staff recommending a series of steps that the working party wants to do that the staff don't support.
Question's been answered.
Good. So, all right. So we're clear. So 4.1. Background. It talks about the growth of weed and algae, and I need to pick up on this because of something I've just heard from the working party. It says the growth of weed and algae has been a problem in the pond since the addition of copper sulphate was stopped. Now, from my memory, that stopped in like the late 1980s. Is that right?
90s.
Copper sulphate?
1998, I think.
90s.
It stopped around about the time the RMA was introduced.
So it's been a long time, and
1996.
the question I'm asking is, we had algae choking the pond before the stormwater started going into it. Correct?
So all of this has been set out in multiple reports, so I'm not going over the whole history of it. Can you focus your questions on the report that's in front of you? Thank you.
Well, I also focused another one on the report is it says the recommendation from staff who don't support the recommendation says that if we go forward, we need an independent expert monitoring the situation. I would feel a lot better if we'd had that independent assessment presented to us on the current amount of on the current trial. Why don't we already have that independent advice?
Mr. White?
Through the chair, it's a good question. We've had budget constraints from it. So the moment we realised the budget of 145,000, we've been at our limit there. So we've had the results through from Dr. Tannock, given his perspective of how it's going, and we've not had the available funds to get an alternative assessment done.
Okay, my last question relates to something that we heard a short time ago, which is the area cannot apparently be returned to an estuarine environment, and I would just like to ask the staff if that is true, because I've never heard that before.
Mr. Light, do you want to make a comment in that regard, if you're able to?
Yeah, through the chair. No, I'm not able to give a comment on that. I arrived on the project about 12 weeks ago working on it, so I don't have a full appreciation of the estuarine option, and so I can't really comment on the viability of that.
Perhaps the question is, can the stormwater system be ceased? Can this be removed in terms of a discharge? You may not be your area.
I can't answer that question at this moment.
I think
Chief Executive may be able to answer that.
I suspect that you could you would need some sort of wetland treatment of the water that comes out of the pump station is certainly not fit standard to go straight into the back beach. But wetland treatment of stormwater is quite a common technique. So I'm guessing you probably may need a third of that area set up as a wetland to treat the water with some sort of bund to retain it. But that's a very off-the-cuff, uninformed, best guess.
But it's doable.
Maybe. We would need to investigate it.
With my commissioner hat on, I'm going to say, Mr Chief Executive, that best guesses aren't good enough when it comes to a regional council coastal matters. Sorry, in freshwater matters. I appreciate that. So.
No, but I was responding to the comment that it wouldn't work.
Yes, I think that's fairly clear. So I think there is you'd have to explore the options, but I'm not here to get into a long debate, John, so we've got councillors coming next. I think we've got enough information there to put some context around the situation. My next person on the list is Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I've got a couple of questions. Probably the first one to the officer is that we talked about, variations to a resource consent, and if we're doing a long-term application, needs to be fully informed by the trial. So the trial's been running for, 3 or 4 months. Do you have enough information for a resource consent variation or application for the long term?
Through the chair, no, you probably need to get through the warm summer months to understand the implications of that, of what effect that would have.
Okay. Which takes me on to the next one. When I was reading the report, there seems to be a huge number of variables that you have to take into account. Like inflows, is that rainwater and stormwater? The transpiration rates, so evaporation, the effect of wind across the water, temperature, climatic conditions, mixing rates, they're all variables that I assume you put it into some kind of magic box formula and it comes out with a dosing rate, or is it a bit like a suck it and see what works and what's not? Clear?
So through the chair, we gave as much information as we knew at the time to the supplier, Dr. Tannock, who worked to confirm what they thought that dosing rate would be. And then as we undertook the trial, it then became apparent that these hotspots poured in greater nutrients. We weren't aware of the quality of that water as it came in, and then obviously coming from the stormwater system, we didn't appreciate the effects I guess it would have had. And as you said, there are a lot of variables at play here, so it's not just the water level, so we've got to try and maintain a better water level. Mixing is important. We have to make sure that we're getting the managing the nutrients, and there are a lot of things at play here, as well as temperature.
So when we were talking about a lot of the knowns and unknowns, when did we find out about these, was it these inflows or these springs?
The severity, well, the hot spots were the water quality of those were known after we had set the dosing limits.
Right, because I can go back to the email from Dr. Tannock dated that he sent to all of us on the 3rd of December. He raised a number of issues, and I'm just wondering, he seemed to express frustration at the disproportionate amount of time and effort. Sorts of things we've just been talking about. Is that part of that?
So,
part of that context of so many variables being taken into account?
So, through the chair, so there are, in his report, which I've attached in here, that he does speak of those variables of the water levels, etc. So, with regards to, we didn't sample the water quality of those hotspots until after the dosing limit had been set. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I'll leave it there on Ben.
Nigel, is there something you wanted to add there about these hotspots?
Yeah, throughout the course of the beginning of before the trial, in our working party meetings, when Dr. Tannock was able to come to those, was when during the discussions we found out that, I made crossings across the pond and realised there was warmer spots within the pond because Dr. Tannock was saying he couldn't believe how quickly the algae was growing, given that it had been cleaned out in December. And that was around about the time where that it had been decided that there was more investigation required into why there was these warm spots within the pond, and that was obviously after the dose rate had already been set.
By the consent, thank you. Councillor Ackland, followed by Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, through you. Just what, like the last photograph that you had up,
Which one?
I think it was the drone shot. Yeah, or one of those. That's fine. And I just want to ask. Well, that one's good. What would success look like in terms of that photo?
Hopefully none of that.
None of that.
Hopefully.
Okay. And then compared to what has happened to date, what's going to change that's going to achieve that? Like,
Through you, Madam Chair. If we can, because we're mixing air more efficiently now, and we hope if you allow us to continue, because this is one of the things that we kind of came unstuck on, is that this is an 18-month trial and we had a review period after the 3 months, but none of us
Working party
realised that it was a place where it might be stopped. Because as Claire's, through you, Madam Chair, Claire Barton's pointed out, we don't know until we get the data, and that's why it's so damn costly, is because it's collecting the data, the professionals collecting the data. But one of the things we can say, Luke, is that if you look back at those original ones that I took back before the October event, we did have, come on, that one there, that's what we had.
And that's what we were hoping to achieve.
And that's what we want to get back to.
so what? So, through you, Madam Mayor. So, no, and I understand that.
Yeah, okay, good.
I mean, when you look at those photos, though, it's pretty clear it hasn't worked today. That's fair enough, right? And you're saying that over the course of the trial, though, we're hoping it is going to work because we're going to put in some more and mix it more thoroughly.
I may be able to help you there. We are so close to getting the information that we need. We just need to go through the risk period of the summer, because that may yet throw us out. Dr. Tannock is comfortable that the amount of that is being dosed at the moment on a daily basis is adequate. And for a start, we weren't dosing at that rate, we were dosing less than that. And so we increased the dose up to the level of the resource consent maximum. But what we're aiming for is, if that's adequate, mixing is not. And so we have proven that if we improve the mixing, then that amount is adequate. But it may be that we dose at a lower level, and then when we get a storm event, we can respond quickly and counter it, because at the moment we don't know how many nutrients have come in until it happens to be the next sampling time, and then that goes away to the laboratory, and then we get it back and we say, well, that's just confirming what we knew or what we suspected. So we're so close to knowing exactly what was needed to be known. The problem is, quite honestly, is that dead algae, the yellow algae that you see down there at the moment, looks horrible. And a person who doesn't know would say, hey, it hasn't worked. And we've got members of the public have said, come to us as we've been working down there, and they've said, hey, have you stopped your job? You know, because a few months ago it was great. Well,
Councillor Walker, I'm going to have to ask you to speed up, and you need to be answering when you get asked a question from a councillor. At the moment you're in an unusual role of sitting here speaking on behalf of the working party. You need to answer back into the meeting, because otherwise what happens is I watch all the people over here switch off and your message doesn't get through.
But Madam Mayor, just, sorry, my final question to the working party, and thanks, Councillor Walker, is just like, what date, like how long through the next period of time? $130,000, right? you support that option 3, $130,000. At what point through this, though, do you say, actually, it is or it isn't working? Yeah, it isn't working. Do you know what that date is, or do we see you in at the end of the trial period saying, well, hang on, if we did this and if we do that and if we do that? Like, when does it end? Essentially, I'm asking you for your own knowledge of when it ends.
Do you want to, Mr. Butt?
This is Alan Mallock, Modelers Society.
Through the chair, thank you.
Speak up. Speak up.
The trial is for 18 months. Dr. Tannock has obviously decided on this period of time so that he can gather sufficient data, which has not always been available to him, or the quality of it's not been available to him as wanted, so we need to improve our data collection. We need to run the length of time so that we've got a seasonal effects of what's happening in the pond, so that we can then make judgments about how we treat it, how often. And the other thing we've already talked about is improving the circulation. So we can focus on getting those things done and last the 18 months and go through the full cycle. We've got a better idea of providing a city with a good resource.
Right, I'm just going to interject there, and I know you've been like, but I'm just going to have to say, Mr. Gilbertson came to see me yesterday to prepare for this meeting, and I'm sorry, Alan, but he came and said to me that you would be seeking something different from that, as long with Councillor Walker. Now, if overnight you've had a change of position, then I need to understand that in terms of how answering when is it going to be that you actually come back in? We need some clarity on this, because you're now giving very mixed messages.
Okay, sorry about that, Rachel. As I said to you yesterday, one of the things is we didn't want to confuse you. In the summary document that I sent out, I actually mentioned a whole lot of points, and those points are because we believe very strongly that this will mean that we get a long-term solution, and that you need to get a heads up as to what might happen for the annual plan in the future, because I don't want to have to come back to every bloody annual plan and ask for more funding. No, thank you. But I've sat here enough. So what we're actually saying is there's no point in us stopping it now because we don't have a long enough thing. If we can't go the 18 months because the funds are unpalatable to the council, then we need to get it past the summer months. And so that's why we've said let's run it till the end of April, beginning of, I call it May, but the end of April, so that we have done exactly that. And hopefully, I don't know what Ms Barton actually thinks about that idea, but I'm kind of hoping that that will give us enough data through that period of time to be able to say to you guys, look, here's a solution that you ought to adopt, and you ought to make the necessary resource consent things going forward. But that's where we're at the moment. We're actually supporting option 3, which is that you approve it to go through till the end of April.
Thanks. Don't you know before, like when you're doing it, when you know you've got your circulation right, there's no more circulation you can do, you know whether it's working or not, don't you? Because there's weed there, or there's not weed there.
But yeah, but what's, we don't know when the rain events are going to be. We're dealing with a biological problem here. It's not like an engineering thing that you can just decide on a date, build it, and that'll fix it. It's not like that. It's biology. And that's why we need to be able to vary the situation to meet the needs. We could have 2 rain events, and usually, if you look at history, having been in the accommodation sector, I know that just around Christmas time we get drenched because all the people out of the holiday park disappear. But so we would be expecting there will be some major rain events later this month, and they will have an impact on what's happening in the pond. That's why, if we can get a continuation today, we've had success with our electric outboard, which is a stitched together Kiwi invention. Can you see it there under the white thing?
Mr Gilbertson, I have to say to you that you're starting to disadvantage your position by speaking for so long that you're not giving the councillors a chance to ask their questions. Can I go to Councillor Courtney now? Then I've got Councillor Barker, then I've got Councillor Delbig, then I've got Councillor Rutledge, then I've got Councillor Noonan. Is there anybody else? And Councillor Fulton would like to come back with some more questions, and Councillor Laurie would like to come back with some more questions. All right, quick questions, quick answers.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Rachel. Through to David, has your relationship with Dr. Tannock been restored?
Through the chair, I've got a, I would say, a positive working relationship with Dr. Tannock. I understand in his email he made reference to that. So at the moment, there aren't any. I don't have any issues with Dr. Tannock.
I've got another couple of follow-ups on that. So he is actually engaged in the project again, because according to the front page of the Nelson Mail, he had distanced himself from it as at that point.
So through the chair...
Well, is that not a legitimate question?
So through the chair, at the moment I understand that Dr. Tannock had said he was no longer offering his professional services to provide advice. At the moment our correspondence is going via the general manager, is it, at that organisation.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just if I could ask Councillor Walker, perhaps, were you surprised by Dr. Tannock's article in the paper, and was there any substance to that in your view?
No.
I'm in a difficult position. I have the utmost respect for David and his team. A lot of what he probably referred to occurred some time ago. The code of conduct that we work under prevents me from elaborating more. But I think that generally in life I've learnt that where there's smoke there's a bit of fire. And I'd rather leave it at that.
Councillor Barker, Councillor Delbig.
Thank you, Your Worship. The question's to the Chief Executive, and wondering whether he can speak on behalf of his officer responsible at the time for it. But I'm interested to know what the view was on the 31st of October. I've been shown a photograph of what looked like a successful removal of algae using this method. Did you officers believe that it had been successful at that time when you saw it like that?
David, were you working on the project at that stage? Thank you.
Through the chair, yeah, at that specific moment in time, it was positive. And as my report, actually, I go to state that I do, you know, the diatomics has been successful in limiting the algae growth. From the evidence that I've seen, it has been successful in limiting the growth, but there are many variables at play here, which is stopping it being successful, as, you know, 100% successful.
So the follow-up question is why, having seen success, are you now not supporting the continuation when you know that it has been successful at one stage? What is the reason? What is your reason for not wanting to continue with the trial?
So through the chair, that's a good question. So at the moment there are too many variables at play. We're struggling to control it. I have concerns that we're not going to be able to provide an answer in 6 months' time as to whether we should continue or not. At the cost of it is operational expenditure. So as we know that we've got it's a lot more of an impact when it comes to managing those, managing the trial and the effect it has. So taking into account the variables at play, the cost that it will have, and I'm unsure whether it's going to be successful in the long term and a manageable system in the long term. I have my, that's why I cannot support it.
And finally, on the same topic, have you taken into account the opportunity cost of not doing it?
So, through the chair, from my opinion, we would look to actually come back and review alternative options, including diatomics.
Thank you. Councillor Delbig.
Yeah, thanks, Arthur. Thanks. Those last couple of quick questions were excellent. The question I'd like to do is going forward, if we cease this trial and go back to the existing, do we need consent? Do we need a consent, and does it cost as much as it does now?
Sorry, through the chair, can you repeat that?
So if you stop this trial and we go back to where we were before, discharging into the estuary through the settling pond, do we have a consent or do we need a consent? And if so, what is the cost of that?
So as I understand it, we already have a consent for the existing setup pre-trial. So we've got a 3-week phase to close out the current trial, and then have a final report on that, and then the status quo would remain, and we have a consent for that.
So the maintenance cost going forward is...
So if you refer to some of my options, where we are stopping the trial, we've allowed a cost for doing that maintenance, and that cost varies depending on the time of the year we stop the trial. So I think it's approximately $30,000 I've put for maintain it to the end of this year, whilst on the option 3, I think I put a $5,000 associated to just doing a clean out because you're towards the tail end of the...
Just trying to get the idea, it's considerably less. Second question then would be, so if we decide to fill the pond in, we need some sort of small settling area, retention of this sludge, etc.?
So through the chair, yes, we would anticipate some sort of detention would be required, or we'd have to investigate what that would be, but based on I haven't got the understanding of how big a pond it would need to be, but I anticipate it would need to be that size.
Thank you. So where I was heading to there, so in this trial, the data we're getting, would that data be useful in managing the algae in a smaller pond anyway? So I'm kind of thinking we're not losing anything here. So the question is, in your smaller pond retention later, would this data contain the algae? Because I'm assuming the algae will be growing in that anyway.
Through the chair, I anticipate we probably wouldn't be treating the algae, we would just let that grow in that particular scenario, because it wouldn't be used for a model facility.
And just following up that, the algae in Queen's Gardens, sorry, is that the same algae that's in here?
No, and Councillor Delberg, beyond the scope. Okay, Councillor Rutledge.
I don't think Officer Lights has smelt that pond in the middle of summer if the algae's left to grow by itself.
Questions, please.
So the question is, the report was written prior to this enhanced mixing solution happening, and there's some interesting photos that sort of suggest that might have changed the game a bit. So do you still have the same opinion that you had when you wrote the report?
Through the chair, yes, I do. We're going to be getting through to the summer, hotter months, and we're going to face bigger challenges there, I anticipate.
Okay, and then the other one is on the cost. So you look at the cost breakdown, and you've got these gentlemen over here sort of rolling up their sleeves and doing a whole lot of work and saving a whole lot of money in the trial. And then you've got this big black box of large consultant to go around and scoop up a bit of water and do some testing on it. That's a massive amount of money. When we looked back at this and we had a teleconference and looked at the costs when the trial was getting expensive, it was very easy to start pulling out some of those very expensive consultants' costs, but we can't see that in this financial model. Are you confident that these resource consent monitoring fees are being done in a way that is as efficient as possible?
Through the chair. So originally, when the consent was going to happen, I believe there was going to be some handheld tools that were quite simple to use to get the required information. Turns out that wasn't the case, and that NALMAC currently have a apparatus in place, and I believe it's around about $40,000, or is that correct, to buy it. So it's required for them to be using it, and so yeah, they would maintain, or they would operate that equipment rather than volunteers.
NALMAC?
Yes.
I thought it was Opus, on the reports, Opus doing that, their monitoring work.
So NALMAC are doing, there's there's operational monitoring, so NAMIC are doing that, and then Opus are then basically reviewing those results.
Well, okay, and finally from me, Madam Mayor, the conversation that was had before around the concerns about if the stuff gets out into the bay and there's toxic algal bloom or things like that, is that founded on backed up by any scientific evidence from anywhere else in the world that that's a reasonable risk in this case?
Through the chair, I can't answer that specific question.
Can anybody?
Madam Mayor, can I?
Ms Barton, are you aware of any other trials around New Zealand, in a New Zealand context or relevant context?
No, I'm not. I'm not at all. But the other bit that I would just clarify is that there are two sets of monitoring requirements. There's the monitoring for the consent, and there is monitoring from an operational perspective to check whether it's actually being effective. So the consent conditions require certain monitoring, and there's monitoring being undertaken through the operation to make sure it's actually working, and that's not part of the consent.
Okay, so and at the moment the report, if I read it right, said that there's been no adverse effects identified to date. Is that correct?
So through you, Madam Mayor, at this point in time, we're satisfied as a regulatory authority that the consent conditions are being complied with, but we have not yet got the data in full set to actually confirm whether any ongoing adverse effects would be minor, more than minor, or anything else.
Right. Probably I've got a follow-up question on that. David, as you're the proxy for the holder of the consent for this, is there a condition in the consent that would cause something to trigger for you to have to come and see the consent authority to stop? Is there some sort of, were there conditions put in there that was said, if X happens, you must come and tell
through the chair. So we do, I think, 6 weekly samples. We then test to see if we've got these toxic algae.
That's the concern.
And so the moment we get that, we then, the trial, we go through a process of elimination. Is it actually diatomics that's causing it? But we would stop it at that precise moment in time to understand and verify where we think that source is coming from. And if it's deemed that it's not the diatomics, then we would probably kickstart the trial back up again. Is that correct?
All right, okay, so it's around toxic algae effects. Yes, okay, right. Next on the list is Councillor Noonan, Councillor Laurie and Councillor Fulton. I think we're done with questions.
Me? Is it me? Yes. Okay. Sorry, I got lost in the. It's been a long line, hasn't it? My question is regarding the consents, and when I'm looking at the recommendation, and if we granted the recommendation, and you've got your 5 months, if we get to the end of that time and we decide, or we're given proof that it's working, how quickly do we have to get another consent to continue, and how nimble are we at being able to get that if we would like it? What I don't want to see is a gap where there's a lapse in being able to use this method just because we haven't got a piece of paper. So if I could have a response to that question.
Through the chair, I don't have a specific answer on the timelines for achieving that. It is it's a regulatory matter. We could do some pre-work around that to try and get a smoother transition, but I suspect that there will be a time where it stops and we would have to wait to get a consent.
Madam Mayor, I would just confirm that the consent currently allows for an 18-month trial. I'm not sure how far through we are for that 18 months. 3 months into it. So that would give adequate time for the consent holder to provide the information well in advance of that expiry of 18 months to go through a process of a new consent for a longer term.
Well, I think I'm going to request that we find out prior to the end of this trial period if we're going to have to extend it, so that we've got a report as to where we are when this is going to expire, that we're actually going to seamlessly carry on if it's working. And I don't know whether you want to put something in here or whether I just want to make
Not
sure
at the
that...
moment, Councillor Noonan. I just want to get all the questions, and then I'm going to take a little bit of a break, and then we're going to come back for the debate. And then during that time, we can have a discussion around that as to whether, once I get the rest of the questions, understand what we've got going on. But as you've got your microphone on, would you care to move?
I'm very
that we
happy.
extend the meeting beyond the time that's healthy to sit down.
Oh, if I have to, yes, I will.
Thank you. So, somebody who's... Thank you, seconder.
And I'd also like to move this, or I would...
I need to put it... That procedural motion?
Aye.
Carried.
I would be prepared to either move or second this. I'm just thinking that
Thank
maybe
you.
somebody around the table who might prefer to move it.
No, you just get on and move.
I will be.
Thank you.
I would like to move.
Efficiencies, good.
I'd like
Thank you,
to
Councillor Delberg. It's been moved and seconded. Very helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor, any other councillors to go? Councillor Laurie, Councillor Fulton, and a very small question from Councillor McGurk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I just need to be reminded, how much have we spent on the biological solution for the Models Pond so far?
It's in here.
In total?
Mr. Light, do you know the answer to that one?
So this financial year it's been 140, well it'll end up being at this precise moment $155,000 or thereabouts to get to this point.
Right, total, okay, good to know. And if we, through the chair, if we follow the advice of staff and we don't continue with the trial, how long would it be before we came up with a plan B? And how long would it take before we started making that plan B happen?
Mr. Light?
Through the chair, I haven't got an idea on the exact timeline that would take. We'd have to come back out, investigate all the options available, bring that back to council for a discussion of how to proceed, and then from that moment you would then start pursuing that option.
Design, consent, construct.
Design, consent, construct, and then so in that short term, in the interim, you'd probably just continue in the status quo of council of routine maintenance.
Which through the chair, can you remind me, how much was that about $60,000 a year?
So it's typically, it's been more expensive recently because we've done the clean outs, but it's been on average around about 45k when we're just skimming off the surface of the algae.
Thank you. Councillor Fulton.
I've got 4 questions through the chair. My first question was actually around that. I'm very surprised to see an officer's report which does not support any options apart from option 5, but then option 5 says enables other options to be assessed. Are you aware of how many options we've looked at over the past 8 years? Right, do you know how many...
Councillor, could you
Sorry, I just want,
that
do you know
question,
how many
please?
options we've already considered?
Through the chair, yes, I'm aware that this has been an ongoing issue for a very long time.
So at this point in time, have you got a better option? Because I have not heard of anything else. Have you got a better option?
No, through the chair, I don't, but and that's my answer at this precise moment.
Okay, so over the time that this has come back and back and back to us and the money we have sunk into trying to explore options, and we've looked at fish and we've looked at this and we've looked at that and we have looked at every single option, I don't think there are any other options at this point in time, and I want to congratulate the working party on working so hard with this option with limited resources. So my next question is, if this is successful, do you have an idea of what the ongoing annual costs are? Let's say we get 2 years down the track and we've done all our monitoring, we've got our resource consents right, and we know what the dose needs to be and how to change it with weather. Have you got some estimate of the annual operating cost of keeping the diatom?
No report.
And it's non-toxic algae, and you know.
Could you just identify the page number where that's set out for us, David? That would be really helpful, and Councillor Fulton can read that.
Sorry if I've missed it.
Any other questions?
Yeah, and then
David will give you the page number shortly.
And then my last question for the working group is, it seems to me option 3 is not necessarily setting you up for success. I'd like to set you up for success. In terms of, you keep talking about an 18-month trial, my preference would be to go for option 1 and actually support this project to be successful rather than continue to have obstacles. I don't probably have enough support around the table for that. But do you think that if we were to invest in option 1, that would ultimately pay off and solve this problem once and for all?
It's a question for the working party, is it? Or?
It's a question for the working party.
Right.
As chair of the working party and as a councillor, I could not support the amount that's been spoken of for 18 months. It's just so totally unrealistic. We are extremely close to getting the information that we need to make a valued judgment in 5 months' time. And I'm absolutely sure that approaching that period we'll have a really good idea as to where we're heading. And at that point, I'm sure that David Light and his team will be able to come back with what the prognosis is if we carry on, etc. But right at the moment, I can't justify $600,000 to continue on that sort of cost.
Didn't read 600,000. Apologies if it's. I thought it was 265.
No. So you know that I feel
Any
that
final
we're really
questions,
close.
Councillor Fulton?
Can someone give me the page number of, if this works, what the ongoing annual operating cost is anticipated to be, please?
Through the chair, if you go to section 6 on the finances, 6.5 basically says the range in which those costs would be between 75 to 190,000, depending on what is required from a monitoring perspective.
Thank you, David. Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, that's a pretty quick question. I think some of the questions have been sort of asked and answered in part, but in light of the second recommendation up there, can you give me, or give the council an indication when we could when it be reasonably be known that the option up there is either an appropriate or inappropriate solution? When can you reasonably be expected to know it's appropriate or inappropriate?
I think that... I do feel, Councillor McGurk, that David's done his very best to answer that already. He said to you, it isn't a black-white exercise here. There are many variables, and they've given their advice around clarity and cost and risk.
Well, there's an option with respect to stop it now. Is there enough information to... Says, we don't think this is an appropriate, or we think it's an appropriate solution. Or they've gone out and says, look, push it out to February. Is that appropriate time, or is it in April? Or do you do the whole 18-month trial? When will we know that, you know, balancing all the variables, the amount of money we've got to spend that is available, when can you say, look, this is a best...
Look, I'm sorry, Councillor McGurk, I read the officer advice to be in clause 2. The officers do not support continuing with the trial beyond the 3-month initial period. That means stop. And if I've got that wrong, but that's how I've read it. The officer advice is based on the matters that they've already told you about today. They're saying stop. They're seeing some improvement, but they're bringing you a whole package. They don't bring one-dimensional advice.
Is that enough information to want to put? Well, I suppose what it is, if that's enough information to apply for a new resource consent or variation as a permanent solution. Or is that to say, look, this is not working, it's time to put... Because that's the course of action we've basically, do we invest to carry on to get to the solution that this dynamics is the answer? Or do we know enough to say it's not the answer?
I'm not quite sure of your question, I'm just struggling a bit here, so...
So, the staff advice is, we don't think the trial will work. The working party has a different view, and so that's, I think, the answer to your question.
Thank you. Right, that's all of the questions, and now it's been moved and seconded, so if we could do a nice swift debate, we can get this one dealt with and then we can go to afternoon tea. So thank you very much. I'll just ask the working group members to leave the table. Thank you very much for coming to see us. Just before we go into the debate, Chief Executive just wants to make one comment that's very important and important for you because you have particular responsibilities under legislation.
So one of the things that is great about this project is the volunteer labour saving us cost. But at the end of the day, I just have to remind everybody, this is a Nelson City Council workplace and health and safety under that sheets back to me, so that if the vote is to continue the trial, we must comply with our health and safety requirements. We can't try and cut costs at the expense of health and safety.
And I would endorse that. For every single one of you sitting here, you have officer responsibilities under that legislation, and you must take them very seriously. A requirement for you to do so. All right, so it's been moved and seconded. Does anyone wish to, hopefully we should be well across this by now, and we've read all the material, we've had it multiple times, so entering the debate, speaking for or against. That's what I'm up to now. Councillor Rutledge first, Councillor Law second, and we may go 3-3.
I apologise, Madam Mayor, I just need clarification in light of that. The appropriate health and safety measures costed in what we're discussing here, the
right, that's a fair question.
Yes. Okay, good.
All right, next, I'm sorry, I've just run, I did have a question, I got lost myself on that long list. I have one question, so sorry, David, actually it's probably just running through here. The working group is saying they'd like to continue for 5 months. Are they wanting to increase the dosage? So I would need to know exactly what the working group is saying, no increase in dosage, or they want an increase in dosage? Councillor Walker can answer these ones.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. The mixing is the key. Dr. Tannock is confident that the amount of dosing that we have available to us through the consent will be adequate as long as we have adequate mixing, and that's what we've achieved right now.
Right, you don't think that while you're here you should make provision for increasing your dosage?
Well, it would be nice to give us the flexibility, but I'm just mindful of the costs. $30,000 to vary, it seems.
David, if you could just come back.
Through the chair, also it's a matter of time as well. By the time we've gone through that process of extending the consent, I anticipate that the dosing limit will be at towards the end of the trial.
Because it takes that long to get a variation to a resource consent.
So I think not much value.
Thank you. All right.
Didn't address the query that I had, that if we get to the end of this trial and we have a space, which is probably not ideal, we want to be able to
Chief Executive.
So Ms Martin explained that the consent we hold is for an 18-month trial.
She did.
So if we get to the end of another 5 months, we're 8 months into an 18-month trial. So that would give us time through that period to apply for a more permanent consent.
I guess what I'm saying is if we've got till whenever it is, 5 months, further 5 months, but if we get to, it's no good getting to the end of the 5 months and then applying, because we're going to have a problem.
Applying for what? What are you applying for at 5 months, Councillor?
So we don't need to, is that what, I just want to make sure, because I did hear
for what, to do what?
To carry
continue
on.
No, that's correct.
With the consent, without a gap, and reverting back to doing nothing. So I just want to be clear that can carry on.
The consent would allow us to carry on, but what we'll have to also do is put the equivalent amount of money in the annual plan to fund the carry on as well.
Right, that's probably the bit we need then.
It's consented, but it's not funded beyond what you do today.
And we will get a sense of that.
All right, so we had an order. Councillor actually had a question. Do you want to speak in the debate? No, who wants to speak in the debate? Councillor Fulton first. Councillor
Yes, I've just got one quick question following on from those questions, and then I will debate. So at the start of the presentation, it was pointed out that this product's used all around the country and no one else has to get consents. So how do they get around that? Do the staff, is this an open water, more open to the environment?
Councillor, I think what you have to deal with is the existing regulatory environment that is set down in our resource management plan and the approach it that way.
So now that I've found the numbers, it says the annual operating is 75,000 to 190, which seems to be a pretty 75,000 is sort of reasonable versus 45,000. 190,000 seems fairly high. I imagine that is due to the resource consent and monitoring process. If we carry on with this trial and it's successful, I would like to think we could take a look at that and see if we can keep the costs down in terms of ongoing monitoring and ongoing consents. I'm going to support it because I think it is important to carry on with this trial, and because I don't think there are any other options apart from returning it to an estuarine environment, and we have been there on numerous occasions, and each time we have persisted to try and keep this pond as a pond. So I think that we need to support the working group and the hard work they've put in up to this point in time and see this through to the end. Sometimes I appreciate it's an expensive trial, but sometimes we have to do these things to actually see if they work, and if it doesn't work then we will have learnt something along the way, but we get to the end and we still won't have any other options. So I'm very keen to see this through, and I really hope it's successful, and hope that the concentration is high enough within the existing consent that they can achieve what they're setting out to achieve. Good luck.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie.
So first of all, I'd like to say thank you to the Working Party, and particularly Councillor Stuart Walker, for all the time and energy and blood, sweat and tears they've put into this. I really do appreciate it, but I also can't believe that we're still in 2018, December 2018, still talking about the Models Pond. You know, I don't think what we've seen is good enough to justify pouring more ratepayers' money literally into a stinky, slimy hole in the ground. And I think actually we have to face the fact that there will always be potential solutions out there. There might be other things we can try, but people, as Councillor Fulton said, have been trying to get the pond going for a long time, and we still have a pond full of slime. The pond has been full of slime and weeds actually since well into last century. And unfortunately, I think the lack of action, the lack of hard decision making, has been a little bit of a metaphor for some of the other things that have happened at council. We sometimes don't want to make the hard decision, and that ends up landing us in kind of the worst of all sort of situations, where we have a pond full of slime, we have unhappy modellers, we have unhappy members of the public, and we have no plan B. And that there has to be an alternative. I mean, I've been hearing today there's no other option. There should be another option, and we should have actually identified it by now. And this actually makes me quite mad, because earlier on we had an arrangement where we said if the community didn't come to the party to support the rehabilitation of the pond and the sort of lining of the pond last term, we would start working on a business case for Plan B. That never happened. I think that was a mistake. I think the fact we're in this situation right now proves that was a mistake. So as much as part of me would like to support this, I think actually we've got to actually make the tough call, and there's not enough in this report to make me feel good about investing more, spending more ratepayers' money here. And if the council staff would come back saying, you know what, this actually just might do it, I might feel differently. But that's not what the report says.
Councillor Delbert.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I find that last comment odd, really, but I definitely do like the idea of the biological solution. It does actually seem right, and it seems kind of smart as well. And I gather where we're struggling, because there is so many variables. And as someone's walked across in their little waders and found hotspots, I'd hasten to kind of think what's under there, but another bloody challenge. For the investment of $130,000 and 5 months more of time in collecting data, what the impact is on the tail of this problem, I personally think that's an investment if we put this thing to rest. And I think a biological solution's got an equal chance of any to coming up with a solution for us. And I do think Councillor Walker's gone a little overboard on the management, but I congratulate him for getting his little waders on and getting out there with his team. But again, it is about governance and getting our staff to get on with the job and doing it. So hopefully 130,000 and the resource consents we've got in place will get the job done.
Thank you. Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, I'll speak against the motion. And this is unusual because it is extremely rare that I've seen a recommendation like that where the officer's advice is up there that's not supporting it, and then we have a working party wishing to continue. I don't think I've struck anything like that in my time on council. It's very, very clear there are a lot of variables in play, a huge number of variables, and to ask the direct question is, do we know enough whether to go ahead with this or not? And the advice was very, very clear, we know enough. So again, what others have said around the table is probably time, we need to call time on this. I appreciate the work that the working party have done because they've invested heavily in this. And I just wonder if this is a case where we're of seeing not what really is there, but what they are wanting to see. We're always wanting to see the best possible option, and sometimes you just have to take it the cold light of day and say enough is enough is enough. We need to put a line under this and try something else. So for those reasons, I'll be voting against it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in relation to this one? Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be speaking for it, and I'll be hoping that if it wins, that we can be assured that we will have a fully committed total council team working towards the money of the ratepayers that we're expending to do this. I want a fully committed team, both sides of the fence.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Call for division.
Councillor Skinner wishes to speak.
Thank you. Not much to add. It's been explained extremely well. I support what we've got here on the table. I've been on the working party, been taking keen interest in this. And like I said before, there's no real do nothing. There is no do nothing. And I'm not sure why people are so worried about this clause 2 going against officer advice. I take officer advice with greatest respect, but as a councillor, I'm quite comfortable to challenge it.
Thank you. I'm going to speak to this one and I'm going to support it, but with some very serious caveats that Councillor Walker is well aware of. I think that we've had good officer advice here, and I think the officers have really thought about this one, and they've come forward and they've explained why. They've said because this carries some risk with it, and they've been open. They've said, you know, it's about a risk tolerance matter, and actually, there's a this is probably a conservative view, and that's perfectly realistic. It's pointing out that there is a lack of clarity. It is pointing out that there are some significant cost implications of continuing. And if we had, when I've looked at the alternatives of stopping now and going to what are we going to do with a dreadful mess over the peak of summer, I haven't got a much better option at the moment. I have some real concerns about the stormwater methodology that's used here. I have some real concerns about, in whatever form, if we were to make some changes at a later point and move to an estuarine environment, and we still have to have some form of detention pond, keeping a stormwater detention pond in the middle of a recreational reserve. The state of that pond, whether it's, you know, a third of the size and it still looks like it does when it's at its worst, is really quite appalling. I just don't think that's appropriate in the middle of a recreation reserve. I think this is actually, and I'm absolutely, Councillor Laurie, I have, the fact that I'm still discussing a modeller's pond is beyond annoying. It's used up all my goodwill, and I thank you for your contribution, but I'm very clear that if we go for this period of time and there is not absolute clarity that this is going to work, then I'm sorry, that's it. So we need to start, as Councillor Noonan said, thinking about the options. So I think on the table now we need to be anticipating the scenarios that might come forward that it is not going to be successful, and doing some optioning, starting to think about the option of what would happen next. I don't actually think we can leave and suspend this for 5 months and start again with, well, what do we do now? If it is successful, it doesn't necessarily mean that the modeller's pond, in my view, is going to stay in its current form. And I have to say that quite openly to the modellers. What I'm interested in seeing is whether this biological solution can create a better controlled detention pond if we're going to have one. But it may be that the outcome of that, because we look at the ongoing costs and the recreational values, that this council table says, well, that's good, it worked to control the pond environment. That could be useful for a future solution that says, yes, we'll keep the detention pond, but actually our future investment, we want to make a water park or something else in that space. And I have to be really upfront with you now. So I'll back you here, because at the moment I've got nothing else to do over summer to try and sort, well, I've got some options, but they're not particularly, you know, they still cost a fair amount of money. I am interested in seeing whether this will work to create some better control for a future detention pond, but the size of that future detention pond and the ongoing, what the ongoing options will be is for a discussion when this comes back. And I'm saying that to you now so you're very clear. You've got the backing for the trial. You haven't necessarily got the backing for the modeller's pond staying as it is going forward. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are many things in science I don't understand, and this is one of them. But I think it's a good option to try, and we haven't quite had enough time, and I think it's reasonable to ask for a little bit more time to actually see if it works. I think this pond is always going to be a problem, actually. It's been a problem for a long time since they stopped putting that chemical in that you can't put in anymore, and that worked. And somebody will know the name of that, but copper sulphate, there you go. So ever since we've removed that, we've had a problem. I don't think that's going to change. I think we have to be realistic, and I think the community need to know that it is always going to be a challenge, and we might be able to minimise that, but let's give this a shot and see how it goes. Some wise person once said, everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, then it's not the end, and I think this could be one of those moments, really. So no, I also would like to thank the passion of Councillor Walker and his commitment to this. I've never seen anything like it. I think he really wants us to work. So, you know, we've put our best man up there. So thank you, Councillor Walker.
Ready for the division? We're ready for the division.
Councillor Ackland.
No.
Councillor Barker.
Aye.
Councillor Courtney.
Aye.
Councillor Dalberg.
Aye.
Councillor Fulton.
Aye.
Councillor Laurie.
No.
Councillor McGurk.
Aye.
Councillor Matheson.
Yes.
Councillor Noonan.
Yes.
Councillor Rutledge.
Yes.
Councillor Skinner.
Aye.
Councillor Walker. The Mayor.
Aye.
10-3.
It is my neck that's on the line.
The motion is carried, 10 votes to 3. We'll adjourn for 15 minutes for a quick stretch for afternoon tea, and then we're going to be back. So that will be at 10 to 4. Thank you. We are live, so we're resuming our meeting. Welcome back. Now, where are we in our agenda? We're going to deal now with item 11, which is, and I'll invite Lisa and Chris to join the meeting. I'm not sure that we're going to have any questions on this one, whether any of the questions I mentioned earlier has subsequently been resolved. This is procedural. We are receiving a report, improving it to go to the Minister, and we wouldn't be statutorily compliant if we don't send it to the Minister. So this is very much a procedural report, and the only questions that were sent to me have been resolved, so I'm expecting this to be a very quick item. We'll take the report as read. Are there any corrections or additions?
Yes, Madam Mayor, there is one correction on page 213 of your agenda. We just would like to replace the matrix there with a more up-to-date version of the matrix, which I understand has been circulated.
It has been. Everyone will have had that go around. Ruth gave that to us this morning, I think, or Kelsey gave that to us. So that's done. Thank you. All right. No questions? Any questions for the team? Big document, they've gone through it. We had some time to go through and spend some workshop session on it, so in that case, somebody care to move? Thank you, Councillor Courtney, appreciate it. Somebody care to second? Thank you, Councillor Noonan, happy to second. In case no questions or debate, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye, against carried. Thank you very much. Now, we've got a few little items that we just want to go back to. 772. Yes it is. Now, 772. There was just a matter in terms of, there was, Councillor Barker spoke to this one, and he spoke quite passionately on a number of issues, which he's entitled to do, but he raised a time frame issue that did concern me because it didn't quite fit with what I thought. So I just asked Mrs. Parfitt if she could very briefly clarify the time frame issue. Thank you. Just here? Yes, thank you. Just we're from there.
I think I can do it from here. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to reassure that the detailed business case will be completed in this 3-year period. So, and Councillor Barker mentioned some safety concerns about Rocks Road. So, within that work, it's signalled that there is what's called a single stage business case looking at Rocks Road and some improvements for safety there. There may well be some very quick ones that we can do there, but identifying what they are has to be done, and that work is programmed to finish by July 2019, a recommended programme of work to proceed to pre-implementation, and that pre-implementation period would be 2021 to 24. But the final business case will be completed in August 2020.
Thank you. So that's the date. So just wanted that clarification. Are you happy with that clarification, Councillor Barker?
Yes, I'm happy, but I would just want people just to refer to page 54, which is the part of the document for NZTA. Second bullet point on top of page 54 says delivery post 2024. An indicative business case level of detail with sufficient detail to show the preferred program, including scope, scale, location and timing of any improvements, should a new long-term transport corridor be recommended. So I read that we're not going to see anything in terms of real progress until 2024.
Right, so but you're happy now with the clarification from...
I'm happy with the clarification about safety on Rocks Road and things that are being done in the interim, sure. But my concern, or the concern raised when I said it, was that 2024. It's right. Clearly shown there as a date.
All right, Chief Executive is quite clear on this. He's gone through it thoroughly. So is Mrs. Parfitt. I think the RTC has as well, and feeling quite comfortable with
So can I just have an explanation of what will we have achieved by 2024?
So by 2024, we expect a program of work that identifies what will be done to address the transport challenges facing that study area. And in there, if there is a third road identified and it's to be delivered after 2024, one of the things we're specifically asked for is we want to know the timing of it, the location of it, and what it might look like. because there's a lot of emotion about that road and what it might look like, and it would be useful to have some indicative idea of what it would look like in terms of how it might go past intersections, how it would avoid separating communities, those sorts of things. So it was that.
For me, that's a milestone date. Until that happens, we will not know exactly where we're going with the corridor.
Well, Ms. Parfitt indicated the date that we expect all of this information to be provided by.
Just repeat that for us, Mrs. Parfitt.
Well, we expect the detailed business case to be completed in September 2020. 2024, the date 2024 is if an indicative case needs to be developed on that recommended option. So by the end of 2020, we'll have an option, but there is more work that will be needed in the next NLTP period on that.
They're complex projects if you're doing a big construction job. That's realistically, you know, we know that that's the sort of time frame, but there's quite a few steps to go first. So I do want to speak to this one. I just would have preferred that Councillor Laurie was here when I did. So if you don't mind, Councillor Rutledge, I'll just pop that in there. Oh no, here we go, we're good to go. So I just wanted to spend a bit of time going through this one because it's come to the RTC, and I just want to run through the steps that have happened. So the first thing I want to say is that I don't share Councillor Barker's views or expressed around the Board of NZTA. I want to thank the Board of NZTA for the efforts that they made to make sure that this project stayed on track and it was a priority for the people of Nelson. We had good assistance from the board to make sure that we got through these stages as quickly but as effectively as we can. And what I want to reinforce is that when we got the first draft of the National Land Transport Program projects, and they come in a range of forms to us, is that the Rocks Road project and the Rocks Road project. Sorry, Gail, I'll stop. I'll take an adjournment.
No, it's all right. It's just somebody trying to glass of fries.
Oh, okay.
It's all right.
Is there something I need to stop doing or doing? No? Okay.
No, it's more shop for something else. It's all right.
Oh, okay.
It's all right.
Okay, sorry, I've just moved my Christmas tree, it's very beautiful. But sorry, that's all right. Okay, it's lovely, I'll move that over there, I'll come back to that, it's beautiful. So I want to spend some time on this because it is so important to the community, right? And we've worked really hard on this, and I don't know that you actually understand as councillors the work that the RTC members have done to get us to this point. When we got the first indication of where the Rocks Road Walking and Cycling project was and the Nelson Southern Link investigation, they were highly unlikely to get National Land Transport funding. They came in and Jim Harland, said, look, actually, this is not looking good. You are looking like you won't make the cut. So we thought that's a very serious issue for us. Pat engaged a consultant to assist us to do a reassessment, and we put our case forward to have them moved up the list. We were successful in having them moved up the list. We managed to get both the Nelson Southern Link investigation and the Rocks Road project signed off by the Board of NZTA and the National Land Transport Fund. That means that you have committed funding for those projects. Several of you have been to the Regional Land Transport Committee enough times to know that Mr Harland has said to you that the Nelson Southern Link investigation and the Rocks Road project go hand in glove. You are going to have to do the initial continue with these next stages of the Nelson Southern Link investigation to provide you the platform to advance the Rocks Road Walking and Cycling project. So we knew that, and we knew that that was our objective. But we also went in with a clear message to say that we have been waiting a long time to get the Rocks Road Walking and Cycling signed out, to get to the next step, to have a plan of moving forward, because that is a very underperforming waterfront in terms of walking and cycling and recreational use. In the meantime, we have used all the available funds that we've got from the Urban Cycleway projects to work on the other ends of it. So we've done the Haven Road project, which was signed out by the previous government. It was great to be able to see that cross-party support for that project when we had Minister Shaw here to do the opening for that. That was great. We have the Tuhunanui end that we've worked on. I want to thank the councillors, Councillor Walker, I think it was Councillor Walker and Councillor Laurie who've worked on that one, and with a good community engagement to bring it forward. So what we've been able to do is to get now the commitment, and it hasn't been easy, to get the funding for both projects and to get the commitment to try and push the Rocks Road walking and cycling project earlier. Now, what that will look like at this stage, we don't know. But I felt far more positive when I asked some questions of Mr Harland at the last Regional Transport Committee that it may well be of some scale. And so that is still our objective. Now, I know for some people in Nelson, they will say, no, if you do walking and cycling improvements on the waterfront, that will mean your state highway will never move, and that's what they want. For those people, I don't know if the state highway will move or not move. We don't know that. But what I can say is the proposal that will be put forward to do the walking and cycling will have contemplated that. It will have thought about that. So I have to say this is probably, and it's taken a long time, and I've sat through a lot of councils, and it was one of the reasons I came onto council in 2007, so it's been a long journey to try and improve that waterfront. This is the biggest gain we have had in a very, very long time. It is the biggest. It opens the door now for us to actually be able to achieve a commitment through the National Land Transport Fund for significant capital funding. The significant capital funding is not in this version. So you need to understand we would have to make another case to go forward for the walking and cycling. We would have opportunities, possibly through the Provincial Growth Fund, to access if we got some sign-off, because the way that the structure for NZTA has been and the priorities now means that for regions like ours, we do have the ability to do some additional funding through the Provincial Growth Fund. But I think today you should sit here feeling really positive about where we are. It's been a long wait, and it's been a lot of work, and you have to be constantly watching and pushing and finding a way to keep Nelson at the top of the priority list, because there is such pressure on those transport budgets. Unless you do, you don't get on the list. So I want to firstly thank the other members of the RTC for getting to grips with this pretty quickly. I mean, as I said, I've done, over a decade of this, so I know it really well now, and I understand the steps, and then GPS changed, but I know where to go and look for some of the change. But I want to also thank Pat for having the foresight to get Neil Cree involved to give us some assistance, because that really was a saving grace for us. So it's a good day. So I'm really hoping that you will endorse this and support it. I hear there are different views around the table around it, but actually I still think it is the very, very best option we've got. There are opportunities, and I think transport is changing dramatically in terms of new technology. I look at the changes that we've seen already in Auckland and Christchurch, and you'll have views around Lime scooters, but I can tell you what, they are transforming technology, transport options in urban areas pretty jolly quickly in terms of what's happening. So not fit for everybody, and you've got to have a method of fitting them into a transport network, but I would have thought that smart little cities up for those sorts of challenges. So that's probably enough, but I'm just really, really pleased to have this here today. And I want to thank the Board of NZTA for stepping in to keep the momentum going, because the momentum, as you know, you were briefed to say it was going to be paused, and I went away and thought about that as mayor and went, no, we've pushed hard for this and we're going to push again. And I just want to thank the board chair for having helped me with getting the momentum going. Councillor Rutledge, if you want to speak to this.
Just very briefly, Madam Mayor, and I endorse everything you said there. There's been a huge amount of effort go into this, and at times it looked like we might have been getting set back a very long way, and we all fought very hard because that would have been a poor outcome for our community. So I believe that what we have here is a really positive outcome for Nelson. They're going to do the study properly, and we're going to get some very clear action points out of this. I do want to temper a little bit that single stage business case and what might come out of that. I disagree with some of the, particularly how things were reported, that the sorts of ideas that were proposed by Mr. Olorenshaw would be a potential outcome from that single stage business case. I think something of that scale is more likely to come out of the full study. So I do think we need to be a little bit realistic in how we communicate and what expectations we set with our community, because the way the wording is written around that is very much around lighter touch, lower cost interventions. So unless some money drops in from on high, I don't see NZTA putting tens of millions of dollars through that case. I could be wrong, but that's my read of it now.
Going to put the motion.
Happy to support this.
There's a right to reply. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Very good. Right, moving on. Now we're going to come back to the Part B of the Mayor's report. The Part B of the Mayor's report got a whole lot better over lunch. So I have with me the most beautiful Christmas tree that Julianne Smith, who is the Finance Accounting Officer, she makes these absolutely beautiful, and she has made this one as part of the Finance Raffle Prize, which, did you go to Finance morning tea time? Did you buy raffle tickets? Yes. Very good. I did that last week, and I have successfully been the winner of the Finance Raffle Prize. I took up Councillor Noonan's challenge and said, absolutely go for that, pay it forward. So the winner of the Finance Team Raffle Prize, and it is very appropriate because I was at today's one. I was at speaking at the vigil for Grace Mullane last night in Nelson, where we had so many people turn up to share their grief, but also to come together as a community with hope and commitment. A commitment that we want all of New Zealand to be safe, and we particularly want our country to be safe for women. And family violence towards anyone is just not okay, and you know, for those of you who've sat here for a long time, that it's something I'm absolutely passionate about. Quite a while back, I had to go through quite a challenge to get some banners up in the city. The Torito Family Violence It's Not Okay banners. And it was a challenge then, because that was something that this community really just didn't want to talk about. So they didn't really want the banners up. It was kind of seen as just going a bit too far. The world has changed since then, in a good way. But the statistics around violence towards women, violence in families, is still appalling. They are still dreadful. And at this time of year, unfortunately, for those who do the mahi to support families, our police, our hospitals, our women's refuge, we know that the statistics around family violence go up. Unfortunately, at a time of year where it should be a time of peace and joy and love at Christmas, actually family violence becomes more prevalent. Peace and joy and love are positive things, and that, for me, is what Christmas must be about. And I think our community has been tested lately about remembering what Christmas is about. I hope that in some small way, through what was an absolutely dreadful loss of a beautiful young life, and by people coming together last night at the 1903 site, that we've come back to a bit more of a centre as a community, one that's empathetic, one that's kind, one that actually looks at the incredibly blessed place that we live and focuses on what is important. Because quite often I have to say my inbox fills up with things that really, in the scale of the challenges in life and the sacrifices that people make, they're kind of not so important. They might be to that individual right at the moment, and sometimes they're really quite negative. And I realise at the moment that we've had some challenges, and you'll have had some, reaction to what was actually a very joyful opportunity to include a stronger link between iwi Māori and the Nelson community through our centre parade, created an outcome that I just couldn't have contemplated. And I hope that some way we can just remember that right now it is the season for joy and love and hope. And so my raffle ticket, and I'm very pleased they've got it, I filled it out for Women's Refuge, and I'm going to, with great delight, find time to go and give this great prize to the amazing people that do so much work in Women's Refuge. It just somehow feels like things are coming right, serendipity, and we need a little bit of serendipity at this time of the year. So that is part B of the Mayor's report. I wish you all a fabulous Christmas. Just look out for people who are on their own. Often it can be a challenging time if you're on your own. You're all, of course, invited to come to the Christmas celebration, so which will be at the Trafalgar Centre. So please come down if you want to come down and say hello and help and just be part of it. There's not a lot of speech making, it's just being there with people, having one-on-one conversations, and I know several of you have been down before. Kate and Mike have been, and Gail, I think, and probably others, and I'm sorry if I've missed you, have come down. And it's a lot of fun, so yeah, keep safe. Finally, I can't see you past the Christmas tree, Pat, but Pat's having, as he said, it's just past a year's anniversary since Pat started in the organisation. I wish you a happy anniversary and a Merry Christmas and a great holiday. It's been a mighty year, certainly been a mighty 12 months. You don't get bored being the Chief Executive of Nelson City Council. But I'll just tell you to the councillors, we for the Chief Executive Employment Committee had their meeting. Hope you're okay with us. Had our meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we were sitting at our meeting, and then we were in Rumana, where you can't see. You got the glass, and this sign appeared, and it said, "Pat rocks," and Pat rocks. Thanks for being here. It's been an absolutely fantastic year with you. We're making some real progress, and I just want to thank you for your absolute dedication and commitment to the elected members. I absolutely value your advice as Mayor. I hope the councillors understand the quality of the advice that they're getting from you and your team, and thank you for your support and leadership for the staff group and for all the staff who are here. I reiterate again, thank you so much for your dedication. You are hugely important to the future of this city, and we are just so very, very lucky that you understand the ethic of service and the ethic of caring and kindness, because that's what I see from you every day of the week. So, Merry Christmas. Thank you. All right. Anything else for public business? I bet you there is. There'll be some little mechanic we haven't done. Is that all done? Is that all done? We can move to, yeah, we'll put it back now because I can't, this is distracting me. It's very beautiful, absolutely beautiful. All right, so we're going to move to exclude the public. Are you sure we've done everything? Is there any one thing we haven't done?
We have got to come back, so I'm pretty sure we're done.
We're done? We're all done? All right? Okay, thank you. Moving into public excluded business.
That's in here.
I'm moving, seconded by Councillor Barker. I'll put it. All those in favour? Aye, against, carried.